Well, I'll tell you this much, when it comes to the Masters of the Universe cartoon, I have nothing but fond memories of watching it. And that concludes the cartoon portion of this review. It truly can be sad to see the mighty fall, but with a studio like Canon, you can't help but laugh in their faces as they try to encourage themselves to outdo what they've already done. What started by just two brothers making low-budget films in the 1960s was later sold to two men who took all the money they had and put them into special effects while coming up with the stories later. Throw on top of that some of the most iconic action movie stars of the 1980s, what became a studio's cult claim to fame also became their ultimate undoing. Whether it was making as many Chuck Norris movies as there was memes, okay, maybe not that many, throwing Jean-Claude Van Damme into mindless, nonsensical martial arts films where there's so much going on you can't even tell what's happening, yet you still continue to watch it, or casting Sylvester Stallone in Cobra, a movie where he plays a Los Angeles cop, or a movie like Over the Top where he tries to impress his son that he never knew by winning an arm wrestling competition, the latter of which the studio paid him $12 million to star in.
You thought I was in this for the money?
But across from Sylvester Stallone in Rocky IV was his opponent, one Russian named Ivan Drago, played by Dolph Lundgren, whose life was about to take a big turn in 1987. At this point, Canon was on its last legs, with only 3 movies left to try and recoup their losses. Having bought the Superman franchise for only $5 million, they have decided to make a 4th film in the series, even after the 3rd one underperformed with critics to try and squeeze out some extra cash.
I'm actually having the most fun on this film of all of them. And if we get it right, which I think we're doing, this will be the best of the Superman movies. And that's not just a pep talk, I think it really will be.
Masters of the Universe, a live-action adaptation of a hit cartoon series, and Spider-Man, a film that's fate would only be accomplished based on the previous 2 films' success. And were they successful?
You will lose.
He-Man's origin dates back to 1982 with Mark Taylor, a CEO of Mattel who came up with the idea after seeing Star Wars and giving the characters a more barbaric look. Just like Ninja Turtles and Transformers, He-Man was given the 2D animated cartoon and feature-length toy commercial treatment. Where Transformers stuck to its animated counterpart, Ninja Turtles deviated from what audiences expected and decided to stick with its original Mirage comic book feel.
Awesome!
Masters of the Universe took itself a giant leap further and gave us something that nobody expected, that it could have very well just taken the He-Man name off of it and been its own film. Even as a toy commercial, it doesn't succeed, as it covers very little of what the original source material was. At the time, Dolph Lundgren couldn't talk about how negative he was towards the film, but over the passage of many years and it becoming a cult status, he has grown to show so much disliking for it.
He is intelligent, has a good sense of humor, and he always saves the good people from the bad people.
It was kind of slightly embarrassing to sign on playing a toy, right? For me, it was a bit weird, all this stuff. The little dwarf with a little key and all of that. I felt a little stupid doing it.
After acquiring some of the biggest IPs in the entertainment industry, the studio Canon had to ask itself one question. Now what? Both the productions of the film and its issues began in the spring of 1986. The screenplay was originally penned by screenwriter David O'Dell, whose credentials involved Supergirl and The Dark Crystal. His original concept plan would follow He-Man and his twin sister She-Ra on the planet of Eternia. However, the studio was going over its $22 million budget, so they would have to go ahead and cut down on several key factors, including removing the character of She-Ra altogether, and they limited Eternia to very little in the film, with the majority of the picture taking place on Earth. The film was composed by Bill Conti, best known for working on the Rocky movies, although strangely enough, the only Rocky movie he had no involvement in was Rocky IV. The music he composed for Masters of the Universe is definitely interesting. It was shelved around to different conductors and orchestras, with the music having different levels of quality throughout the audio.
Julie, sure, listen to this.
Sounds great.
As Conti was quoted as saying, "We didn't have anything that went from beginning to end without a problem." Speaking of ending, this film had its own troubles trying to shoot its own ending, but more on that later. The directing job was handed over to Gary Goddard in his first and only directorial effort. You may think that this is the only film he ever directed because the studio went bankrupt. However, a quick search on Wikipedia says otherwise. I'm not going to go so much into detail, I'll just say Google it for yourself.
I don't think so.
With such a vast variety of characters left out of the film, the studio had to come up with some new ideas, including replacing the character of Orca with a troll-looking character named Gwildar.
What have I done?
However, its biggest change is the character of Julie and Kevin, who were never even seen in the cartoon and just made up for the movie. Kevin is played by Robert Duncan McNeil, and Julie is played by Courtney Cox in her very first feature film role. Whereas Dolph Lundgren has been very vocal about his time on the set, the exact opposite would be the case with Courtney Cox, since there is very little interviews with her even discussing the picture. The emotional baggage that her character has, mixed with the set pieces and ridiculous costumes, very much clash and leave you more humorous than you are sad. I mean, there aren't a lot of people who could take a story of an orphan girl who lost both their parents in a plane crash seriously when it cuts from that to a man in a dress hitting a guy with a sword. The driving force so the movie could happen is the cosmic key, the MacGuffin of the film if you will, that can open up any realm the user chooses to use. Believe it or not, I find the first half of the story a lot more entertaining and interesting than the second half, which is very odd considering the fact that the second half is when He-Man becomes more of a central focus character. When you have this high school drama/comedy focusing on this couple with a few He-Man characters standing in the background, I find it to be quite silly. However, when they attempt to make the movie they originally wanted to make by the end, that's when I start to check out. I'm not interested in the character of Julie because I want to see her get over this terrible time in her life. I'm interested in the character because they keep talking about this dark subject matter, and I'm just curious how much darker they can go just so it can be more comedic.
Oh, I'm so sorry I had to go through all of that, Julie, but we had to disappear. We're doing very important, very secret work. Oh, honey, I've missed you so much.
I think a lot of it also has to deal with not seeing these characters in their natural element, plucking them out of a world that we have never visited to and dropping it into our realm, even though it takes place in the 1980s. Still, just seeing somebody like that on Earth, I find to be deeply funny. Even when there aren't too many characters in the scene, everyone just seems like a bull in a china shop. It seems like they're all squeezed together, and when you put them in a real house or a real building, it just seems like that they're ready to knock everything over and they can barely move.
Memory forever! Yes! Let this be our final battle!
The final fight scene between He-Man and Skeletor and Eternia is somewhat equal parts underwhelming and overwhelming. It's underwhelming on the screen, but off the screen, it is very overwhelming how it ended up this way. When you see He-Man and Skeletor fight each other to the death, if you notice, behind them the walls are completely black. This is because the characters are supposed to be linked on with each other and not care about what's going on behind them. At least that's what the studio wanted you to think. The real story is that the studio was tearing down the set because they were running behind schedule.
Tear this place apart!
Throw on top of all this the police chasing after everyone, and this is a very, very loose adaptation of its original source material. I mean, it fits right in line with Flash Gordon in the Super Mario Bros. Movie, being crazy with a bunch of lasers flying and trying to have a much more mature take on a kids program. And on top of all that, the one big thing these films all have in common is the endings, having end on a cliffhanger that never gets resolved.
Daisy!
You gotta come with me, I need your help.
What's wrong?
You're never gonna believe this.
I believe it.
You do?
I believe. I'll be back.
Masters of the Universe was released on August 7th, 1987, having grossed a mere $17 million against its budget of only $22, which is just about how much money it cost to make Superman 4. Throw on top of that terrible critical consensus and a few actors who became rising stars, this film was guaranteed to be set in stone as a future cult classic.
Everything comes to he who waits.
Almost 40 years later, with a new He-Man movie finally coming out, I'm sure this film would do proper justice to its original series. However, I don't know if I even really want that. Just with the Super Mario Bros. Movie, even though the 2023 one may be a more faithful adaptation, I find myself more fascinated with the 1993 version.
Monkey!
Hardcore fans already know who Mario is, however, going into that old film, they didn't know what they were expecting. And going into this new He-Man movie, even though I'm not super familiar with the franchise, I kinda already know who He-Man is, at least in this universe. So while the film may have its restrictions and come across as very much cheap, it was able to pull through and at least be a film at the end with a story that I was able to follow, and in a world with so many films that don't even finish their script, this film at least had enough power. This has been Clay Clay, giving a retrospective on the beautiful garbage that is the Masters of the Universe movie, because I was bored.
What is this thing?
It's a synthesizer.
Oh, yeah? How does this thing work?
There's press these buttons right here.
Like this?
Oh, careful, careful.